This is Jamie Drummond for Good Food Revolution, and I'm sitting here. Actually, I'm squatting. Matt is sitting. I'm here with in Kensington Market with none other than CBC's Matt Galloway. Matt, how are you today?
I'm not so bad. It's a beautiful day in the market. I'm sitting on a stump, which is more comfortable than you'd think. It's a bit sloped though, so if I slide off towards you, you understand why.
Matt, I'd like to begin with asking you a little bit about your upbringing and the importance of food when you were in your family situation when you were growing up.
I grew up, for the most part, outside of Toronto, sort of in the Beaver Valley near Collingwood. That's kind of the closest reference point, although we're nowhere near Collingwood. And it was a very farm-like community. We didn't live on a farm or anything like that, but we had a lot of friends who lived on farms, and I was able to have contact with the people who were growing our foods. There were farmers markets before you called them farmers markets, because you'd buy things from the people just down the road who had chickens, or you'd go and buy a side of beef from somebody around the corner who had cattle. And that was a wonderful way of getting used to food not just being shrink wrapped in a grocery store, but actually coming from an animal or from a field just down the road from you.
So you were very cognizant of that from an early age?
Yeah, I mean, it was never anything more than just that's where you got your food in part. That you could go to the farmer and get eggs, or you bought meat in particular, directly from the farm. We never we never had any high-end sort of food production going on in our house, but our house was very much based around family, and so we all ate dinner together almost every night. I mean, it was a really important thing for us to be involved at the table. And my dad is a great cook, my mother's a wonderful cook, and they introduced me to the joys of community and food and why that's really important. And that's something that we do in our family now. We all sit around together every night, or as often as possible if I'm not out doing something, having dinner at the big table and talking about what happened that day.
Now, I actually wanted to ask you about that. With your position doing CBC's morning time show, how does that affect the family dining schedule?
It doesn't really, for the most part, other than the fact that I'm the one who's now home and able to make dinner, because I go to work at 4 o'clock in the morning and I'm usually home by 12 or 12:30 if I'm not out doing something. So I pick my kids up, we often cook food together, and we all, my partner and my 2 kids and I, will sit around and have dinner at 6 or 6:30 whenever she gets home from work. And it's wonderful. We work really, really hard to ensure, and I limit the amount of times that I'm out in the evening so that we can have that routine, because it's just great for our kids.
Now, how do you feel about Toronto as a food city, a restaurant city and a food city?
As a food city, I love it. I mean, the restaurant side of it, I'm less familiar with now, in part because I go to bed at 9:30 at night, and late nights in particular, standing in line for restaurants or sitting in restaurants until the wee hours of the morning in the middle of the week just doesn't work for me anymore. But as a food city, it's a wonderful place. And we talk a lot on our show, and I've talked a lot in the past about diversity and what makes this city. And the things that make the city unique are the fact that we have the entire world represented here. I mean, you see this in Kensington Market. It's just this incredibly diverse place, and it's unlike anything else in the world. And the easiest way for people to connect with that diversity and make that come alive and make it sound more than just like a great slogan is through food. If you are interested in different kinds of food, you can walk for 5 minutes that way and go to Chinatown. You can go to a great Japanese restaurant that's in the middle of Chinatown. You can go to Parola, which is the Mexican grocery store. You can go and get some chorizo across the street. You can go to the Chilean empanada place, Jumbo Empanadas, just up the road. And that's an amazing opportunity, because you are able to create these sort of intersections between culture in a way that would be really difficult otherwise. Food just opens the door, like music does and like sport can do occasionally, into those kind of cultures that otherwise those doors can be pretty closed, and it can be pretty awkward to go into those communities, and if you aren't really comfortable with those communities.
Now, Beijing aside, have you had much of an opportunity to travel over the last few years, and what have you discovered on a gastronomic level?
China was wonderful. We ate ourselves silly when we were in China. Beijing is a really interesting city to eat in, because it's kind of like the capital city, and a lot of those different Chinese cultures are represented in that city. So that was wonderful. We just came back from a trip to Paris, my partner and I, and we ate ourselves again into a coma over and over again at the recommendation of some wonderful people. Mark Bittman from the Times was really generous in recommending some amazing places. This restaurant called Chez Denise, which we went to a couple of times, and it's so over the top and so intense, and the platters of food are almost as big as this stump that you really leave feeling as though you've been through something really intense and you can't wait to go back. So we went a couple of times there. But for the most part, our eating is spent at our house. We have a wonderful little kitchen, or a good-sized kitchen, and a great little backyard, and our door is always open, and my friends know that, and people are welcome sort of all the time. And so we're always cooking for other people and creating that sort of communal appreciation for food in our place.
Speaking of
I
that,
think a bug just flew into my eye.
It's summer. It's summer.
Occupational hazard, I suppose, of sitting on a stump.
No. I'd like to ask you a little about your involvement with the Stop in Toronto.
The Stop is an amazing organization, and I know a lot about sort of the various groups that are doing really interesting things with food and creating connections through communities by using food to create those connections. But I've never seen anything like the Stop before, because it's started out as a food bank, then turned into a community food center. It's a place where people go on an urgent need to get food. I mean, there are luncheons and dinners there to make sure that people have enough to eat. There's a food bank component to it as well. But it's all about this idea of food as community and kind of using food to build a larger sense of community. And there's a social justice piece to it. There's a real strong education piece to it. And you see that up at the Green Barns, at Witchwood Barns, where there's a farmer's market, and people come to the farmer's market, and then they learn that some of their money actually goes back into paying for people who couldn't afford to go to the farmer's market, paying for them to get quality food. There is that community piece that's really at the heart of it, and that's what makes me excited to be involved in it, is you use food as a way to bridge gaps, not just between cultures, but between incomes. So it's not just high and low, but high, low, and middle, and the people who are all in those various stratas are able to come together around a table through something like food, and that's an amazing thing. And they're just, what they have been able to do in terms of mobilizing interest in food, and it's at the best possible time because people are now talking about food, is incredible. You have this sense that people are building a movement out of something that's more than just people interested in glossy food in a magazine, that it's actually about food as a vehicle and food as a tool, and that's really fun to be involved in.
Well, the Stop's a marvelous organization, and they are one of our good food fighters.
See? It's like a nice little closed loop, and that's the kind of the great thing. I mean, you guys are doing this kind of work. The Stop's doing that sort of work. Real Food for Real Kids is doing that sort of work. There are all these different groups that are operating in different parts of the city, but with the same sort of mission.
Yes, yeah.
And that's fun. I mean, this is a really exciting time to be involved in that. Food is just sort of one aspect of it, but it's about ensuring that the city that you live in and the city that you love is a fair city for everybody, and that food equity piece, that idea that good food should be available to all sorts of people,
yes,
not just to those who can afford to go to a fancy farmer's market, really comes alive and is more than just, again, a nice little talking point.
Matt Galloway, thank you very much for joining us today for Good Food Revolution in Kensington Market. Thank you for taking the time out of your day.
Cheers, no
worries.
worries.
I know you're a very busy man, and we look forward to catching up with you sometime very soon.
Thank you very much, Jamie.